Welcome. Today we're going to be talking to you about second language acquisition, basically how students learn a second language and kind of what that means for you in the classroom, what it looks like. We are a part of the Long Hill School Excel team. We are entering our 4th year. My name is Marielle Dalton. I'm a kindergarten teacher.
My name is Lana Montanaro. I'm also a kindergarten teacher.
Lacey Hebert, 4th grade teacher.
And
I'm Sarah Marr. I'm the TESOL teacher in the building.
so, Sarah, how many people? We have 5 students connected. So again, just go to joinpd.com and then this is the code and it'll get you right to our presentation and some interactive stuff that we're going to work with. So basically when students are learning a new language, we have 2 types of communication that's going on here. The BICS, which is the basic interpersonal communication skills. That's the playground language. When you have a newcomer, especially that doesn't know any English, they're coming in and what they're going to pick up on first, most likely after probably a silent period, is that playground language, really communicating with their friends. They're talking on the bus, they're playing on the playground, things like that. And that's usually between 1 to 3 years, students are really going to be using that language. I had a student that came from China a few years ago, didn't speak a word of English, was silent for a while, and then, you know, after a few months, he had no problem telling me that somebody pushed him on the playground or somebody took his pencil. Could he tell me about character setting, problem solution, those story elements? Not really. That comes later, and that's with the more academic language, and it takes much longer to develop because there's not as much context. It's more cognitively demanding. So over here, we just have a little graphic to kind of show you. When there's a lot of context, this is where your BICS is, a lot of context, your face-to-face conversations. The students can really tell from your body language what's going on. There's a lot for them to really draw from, and that's where they pick up that really basic playground language, so to speak. Where they have a little less context is the telephone conversation, but there really isn't too much cognitive demand because it's very social. As we get more demanding with the academics, to really help students with that language is a lot of demonstrations and experiments because you have a lot of context, a lot of visuals for them to see and develop that language. But something that's more difficult would be a standardized test where there's not a lot of context and it's really demanding for them. So that's basically you're starting with the basics, talking to their peers, and eventually that more academic vocabulary and language comes into play, which could take 5 to 10 years for them to develop that. So we have a question here. So a student in your class communicates perfectly with you and their peers, but struggles in science and social studies, especially when reading is involved. So as a teacher, how can you add context to the reading to help them understand it? So on your devices, you can answer that. So some answers we're seeing already: provide visuals, pre-teaching vocabulary, definitely. Oh, somebody's still typing that one. Getting good answers in there. So yes, visuals are definitely a huge one. Yes?
I'm sorry, how do we post our response?
You should just type
It should, as you type, it should just go.
Oh,
And then
okay.
you go to add another response.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to do it more.
Oh, this is cool.
So again, the visuals is a big one. It really gives the students a lot of context to help them build a meaning. Definitely pre-teaching that vocabulary. We know that's huge, so students really come in already with some background and understanding of what they're going to be seeing. Yeah, asking what they know about it, tapping into their prior knowledge, building that schema to help them pull it all together. So you guys are on it. Pictures, of course. Anchor text, absolutely. So you guys, those are already things that many of you are doing, and there's, you know, plenty of other things, you know, that you do every day that really help students get that context. But definitely the visuals, pre-teaching, and giving them support that way.
Next.
Yep. So common underlying proficiency basically means that students, if they have proficiency in their first native language, those skills will usually translate over into learning English. So for example, if you have a student that's, say, in 5th grade coming over from, say, Mexico, they're a great reader in Spanish, those skills are going to transfer over and make it really easy for them. Well, not really easy, but it'll help their process of learning English because they have that common underlying skills. So if they understand those concepts in their native language, they'll understand those concepts in English, but you really need to help them with the vocabulary and things like that. But if there's an issue with that first language, maybe they've, well, I don't want to give up. You want to go to the questions here? So next question, what are some exceptions, do you think, to the cup theory? You know, that there is that underlying proficiency in the first language. Well, what would be an exception to that? Why wouldn't that necessarily always work? Oh, I see one right there. Gaps in education, that's one of the main ones. If a student has interrupted education or limited education, if they don't really have those skills in their native language because their schooling has been interrupted, they're not gonna have that foundation when it comes to learning English. So that's where you really need to fill in those gaps. Definitely trauma, we've had a lot of different workshops that, between yesterday and today teaching us about that could definitely impact that. Do you have some more answers there, Steve? So I'm seeing learning disability here, and that's an interesting one, because there's always that question of, is it an EL thing or is it a learning disability? And that's always a challenging one. For example, kind of going with this, do they have those basic skills in that native language? I had a student a few years ago that came from Puerto Rico, didn't speak any English, and the parents were like, oh, she's doing great, wonderful, she's in 2nd grade, and I gave her a 1st grade passage in Spanish to see what her ability was in the native language, and she couldn't read it to me. So along with Maria Zampano at that point, we realized maybe there's something else going on there, and we continue to process, but that can definitely play a piece in it, absolutely. Vocabulary not the same in both languages, definitely. Along with that, I'm sorry?
False cognates.
Yeah, the false cognates. If you have a word in Spanish that sounds very similar to a word in English, but they don't mean the same thing. Another one that's not up here is the different directionality of languages. That could play an impact in it. The alphabetic principle, that may not be the same in the languages. So yeah, you guys really hit them there. Yeah.
All right, so Stephen Krashen did a lot of work with researching second language acquisition in the 70s and 80s. And he presented 5 major hypotheses, but what we're really gonna just briefly talk about today is the input hypothesis and the affective filter hypothesis. So the input hypothesis, he really based off Vygotsky's zone of approximal development. He's saying that students should be instructed, RL students, at their current competent level, and then plus a little bit more. So really looking at the zone of approximal development, we know that if they are not getting a little bit more than their competent level, they're going to be bored, and then if it's too hard, they will be frustrated with that. He's also saying that students really need to hear and understand these messages with a comprehensible input. So what are some strategies to help complex classroom input reach I+1 for an English learner? Yeah, definitely building confidence, finding out the student's level. I know we did talk a lot about simplifying a text. I know when PDB mentioned this, is amplifying it. We're really pulling out what is important. Exactly, you don't want to change the content, just provide supports.
What about when you're just speaking in a classroom also? What are some things that you can do to make your input more comprehensible for students?
Repetition. Rate of speech.
Yeah.
I don't know who said it.
Says the TESOL teacher.
I was waiting. I wasn't gonna ask. Christine made me.
Repetition, REP.
ETI.
Yeah, providing them with a wait time, that's definitely really important.
Giving the time for them to comprehend what you're saying.
Okay, and the 5th hypothesis, the affective filter hypothesis, we're going to talk about very briefly. So the affective filter hypothesis is when students have really high motivation, high self-confidence, and low anxiety. They're ready to acquire that second language. They're feeling great about themselves and they're ready to learn. When they have a high affective filter, their self-esteem is very low, motivation is low, their anxiety is high, they kind of have a mental block up, so they're not ready to acquire that language. So what are examples of ways to lower a student's affective filter? So the lower the filter, the more ready they are to acquire that second language. Yeah, definitely all of these mindfulness techniques, think, pair, share, wait time. These will all really help those students lower that affective filter, so they're ready to acquire that second language.
All right, so the stages of second language acquisition, and I actually think you don't need the your device anymore, right? We're done with the questions, so. Second language acquisition is learning a second language after a first language is already established. Many times this happens when a child who speaks a language other than English goes to school for the first time. So the next slide shows us the names of the 5 different stages, and what we're gonna do now, I'm gonna just turn the lights on. So there's pre-production, early production, speech emergence, intermediate fluency, and advanced fluency. We have these worksheets. I can help you out. I got it. Yeah. And if you want to work with the person next to you, turn around. There's a box on the top that has all 5 stages, and just read the book, read each box, and just see what you think, what stage belongs where, and just write it in. So we'll give you a few minutes to read about it, think about what you think. So is there anyone that wants to read out loud? The first box over here on the top. Thank you. All right, go ahead.
Just read it out loud.
Yeah, just read out loud and then we can talk about what your answer was.
Produce connected discourse and narrative. Use extensive vocab. Demonstrate increased levels of accuracy. Read a wide range of text with increased comprehension. Write with greater accuracy and conduct research projects.
So what did you think? What stage was that?
I thought intermediate.
You got it. Bingo. Good job. So that is the intermediate stage. So if you didn't have that, jot that down. Is there anyone that wants to just move on over to the right and read about that? Volunteers. All right. No. No? Okay, thanks.
Speak with less hesitation and demonstrate increasing understanding. Produce longer phrases or sentences with grammatical inaccuracy. Participate more fully in discussion, including those with academic content. Engage in independent reading and use writing for a variety of purposes.
Okay, and what did you think?
I put speech emergence.
Yeah, so that is the speech emergence stage. I'll just go through the next one. At this stage, students have comprehension and production skills comparable to native speakers of the same age. Is there anyone that wants to guess on that one? Advanced. So that is the advanced stage. The next one, try to make sense out of messages, use nonverbal communication or home language, gain familiarity with the sounds, rhythm, and patterns of English, attend to shared reading, but rely on picture clues for understanding. So we only have 2 left. Anyone? 50-50. Pre-production, you got it. So that leaves the early production for the last one, which is demonstrate increased confidence, listen with greater understanding, identify people, places, and objects, use routine expressions independently, repeat, recite memorable language. So this is just for you to take a look at. It has the characteristics. I like especially the teacher prompts when a student is at one of those languages, what we can do as educators, what we can, tell them if they're in the early production stage, like more yes/no questions, lists, labels. If they're going into the speech emergence stage, why, how, explain, those are more applicable for those students. So now we have a different activity. I know we only have like 10 minutes left. Share it loud. Christine, you wanna go? We could go for it.
Tell the bus driver this is your stop. Bus driver, may you please stop here for me?
Okay. What did you think?
I thought that was pretty advanced, addressing the person, and then may you please stop. I mean, a lot of the times we say, can, whatever. I mean, may is.
Yeah, so we marked him as that response as intermediate, but that's pretty advanced too. So there's a there's a line. I mean, I don't know if Sarah wants to jump in. Bus driver, may you please stop here for me, being intermediate.
Okay. Disclaimer, So this was an activity that came from a training that I attended. I think I put advanced on it.
Yeah, that's a tricky one.
Not everyone agreed
That's why we gave
in
it to
this PD. I would say that's advanced, personally, with the main,
Well, I think it too,
Can
it
you
brings up a point that the intermediate and advanced levels do often.
It's fuzzy.
Yeah, it gets fuzzy, it gets gray, so.
You know,
I'm not just saying
I'm
that
gonna
'cause I got it wrong.
jump off here. I forgot his name in the back. We can have his, because he's definitely, that one's intermediate.
Yeah.
Joe, do you mind?
No, I don't mind, I'm
Rena?
sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
I thought somebody else was gonna answer my email, but they bowed out of it. Tell me the story that you see in the pictures. The boy says, "What happened to you? Can I help you?" And then he carries her books. At lunch, he carries her food. Then her dad sees him and shakes his hand. That would be intermediate.
So we said that one's more intermediate because you could see the, the grammar at the end. Then her dad sees him and shakes her hand, or his hand. So that's more of an intermediate response, whereas the other one was
There's an error.
there's an error in there. Mhm.
But what, I mean, a native English speaking
I know.
kid's gonna make grammatical errors or use more colloquial language.
These were from actual Lost Links responses, and they're not forgiving. It's just, that's how it is. It's-
I know,
Yeah.
Fully grammatical sentences.
because that's great. I that's a great response.
Yeah.
It's like, you know what?
11-year-old son, and you say he seed him, and
Yeah.
he goes, he uses kind of,
Right.
makes the same kind of errors in there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to share out their question and answer? I think we can do like 2 more. Go ahead.
Thank you. So our question was, tell me what is happening in the picture. And the answer was Kitty R. climbed tree. So we said early because they were able to identify people played with objects, use not really routine expressions, but recite memorable language.
Okay, so that one, we had as speech emergence, and I think maybe just because they were able to really identify like the people, the places, like Kitty, the tree.
There's also grammatical structure
and
to the
R.
response. So it's not just
Yeah.
kitty, tree, it's a sentence. It's a grammatically incorrect sentence, but there is sentence structure there.
Does anyone have the question that has number 1 on it that wants to share? Maybe it's in here. No, I got it. Oh, it's right here. Okay. So for example, this one was the teacher says, "Tell me what is happening in the picture," and the boy or the girl's response is "he watch." So that is an early production, he watch.
There's not as much detail given in the response.
Yes. And then one more, share out loud.
Question, tell the bus driver this is your stop. Answer, this bus stop. So because of the grammatical inaccuracy, we gave that a speech emergence.
So that was actually an early.
Yeah,
Early.
and that's repeating the prompt.
This bus stop. Like he just copied what was in that statement the teacher gave. So I know that it's.
But this is why it's
Yeah.
hard to see where kids are in their language acquisition, because it does get really fuzzy. But you have to think about things like, are they repeating the words that I gave to them? Are they just giving it right back to me? Or are they generating original responses, using different vocabulary? So those are things to consider.
Does anybody have number 6? Anybody? That was probably my other envelope. So that was the teacher says, "Tell the bus driver this is your stop." And the answer is, "Please stop. Here's where I get off." So that's a very advanced statement. Unlike that one that we marked down to intermediate, there was that one error. So that's why another just like slight difference between those 2 stages.